My son-in-law called me the tyrant of the family at my great-grandson's christening, and before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments, because what I handed him next was a letter that held the power to shatter his entire world. In that moment, I handed him a single envelope that contained the truth, a truth that could either mend our broken bonds or sever them forever. The air in the little chapel hung heavy with the sweet perfume of lilies, a scent that mixed with the quiet, respectful hum of conversation. I ran a hand over the lapel of my best charcoal suit, the one I kept for momentous occasions such as this. My fingers, now spotted with age, trembled just a bit as I adjusted the small silver tie clip, a final gift from my beloved late wife, Roberta. At 72 years of age, I wasn't accustomed to these sorts of family functions any longer. My daughter, Michelle, seldom extended invitations my way, always offering a gentle excuse about wanting a smaller gathering or not wishing to overtire me. But I understood the real reason, the unspoken truth that hung between us. Charles, my son-in-law, for the past 15 years, had made it his personal crusade to methodically push me out of their lives. So when the formal invitation for little Leo's baptism appeared in my mailbox 3 weeks prior, I held it in my hands, staring at the elegant script in utter disbelief. My great-grandson was already a full 3 months old, and this would be my very first time laying eyes on him. I had dedicated days to preparing for this moment, choosing the most thoughtful gift I could conceive of. A soft, hand-knitted blanket that took me the better part of the winter to complete, with his name, Leo, delicately embroidered in the corner. "Dad, you came," Michelle said as I stepped into the church hall, her smile strained and not quite reaching the warmth in her eyes. She gave me a perfunctory, stiff hug, the kind one reserves for a distant colleague, not for their only living parent. "I wouldn't have missed it for anything in the world," I responded, my grip tightening on the briefcase I carried. Tucked inside was the letter, the one I had composed and rewritten more than a dozen times, wrestling with the decision of whether I should ever let Charles see it. The baptismal service itself was profoundly beautiful. Standing near the back of the sanctuary, I watched the pastor bless my great-grandson, and an unexpected wave of emotion brought tears to my eyes. I hadn't been permitted to join the immediate family at the font. "Space is tight up there," Charles had explained, with a dismissive wave of his hand when I first arrived. So I watched from afar, feeling like an outsider at my own family's celebration. Later, during the modest reception held in the church's fellowship hall, I finally saw my opportunity to approach the baby. He was absolutely perfect. He had the same deep blue Gallagher eyes that were a hallmark of our family, and the same distinct dimple in his left cheek that Michelle had when she was an infant. "May I hold him?" I asked my grandson-in-law, Jason, who offered a kind smile and began to shift the baby toward me. "I really don't think that's a good idea," Charles interjected, materializing at our side as if from nowhere. "He's just now settled down." Jason shot me an uncomfortable glance, but didn't argue as Charles took the baby from his arms. "I just wanted to hold him for a second," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "And to give him this." I held out the carefully wrapped gift. Charles eyed the package with a look of pure disdain. "We have more than enough blankets, Arthur," he said, not even bothering to take it from my outstretched hands. I had to swallow hard to keep my composure, fighting back the sting of tears. "I made it myself. It has his name on it." Charles let out a theatrical sigh, as if my very presence was an enormous burden. "Fine. Just leave it on the table with the other gifts." I dutifully placed the blanket on the gift table, my heart sinking as I saw Charles's brother immediately shove it aside to make way for a much larger, store-bought box. As I turned away, I overheard Charles speaking to his circle of friends. His voice pitched just loud enough for me to hear every word clearly. "That's Michelle's father," he said, punctuated by a small, derisive laugh. "The tyrant of the family. Always has a critique, always needs to interfere. We do our best to include him, but frankly, it's just exhausting." The cheerful room seemed to go utterly silent, though I'm certain that was only in my own mind. A hot flush of shame rushed to my face as several people cast pitying glances in my direction. My heart began to pound against my ribs, so forcefully I feared it might break through. Michelle was standing nearby, a look of deep discomfort on her face, but she said nothing in my defense. My own daughter, allowing her husband to speak about me in such a manner. In that precise moment, something deep inside me, a part of my spirit that had been bending and yielding for years, finally fractured. With a steadiness that surprised even me, I walked directly toward Charles, who simply raised a questioning eyebrow at my approach. Without uttering a single word, I reached into my coat pocket and withdrew the sealed envelope. "I would like you to read this," I said in a low, even tone, placing it into his free hand. "When you have a moment alone." Charles's expression shifted from confusion to a flicker of alarm. "What is this?" I met his gaze, holding it firm. "It's something I should have given you a very long time ago." As I turned to make my exit, I caught a glimpse of genuine fear in his eyes. He knew, or at least he suspected, what that envelope might contain. The photographs I had stumbled upon by accident last Christmas. The ones that would utterly demolish the flawless facade he had so carefully built for his family and friends. I walked out of that church with my head held high, my back straight, even as hot tears threatened to spill down my cheeks. Behind me, I could hear Charles trying to make excuses, attempting to laugh off the strange encounter. But the subtle tremor in his voice told me everything I needed to know. For 15 long years, I had striven to be the ideal father-in-law, supportive, unobtrusive, loving from the safe distance I was permitted. For 15 years, I had watched as my daughter was slowly, methodically pulled away from me, as my grandchildren were taught that Grandpa Arthur is too busy or Grandpa Arthur is too judgmental. The truth contained in that letter could alter the course of everything, or it could obliterate the last, fragile threads that connected me to my family. As I stepped out into the brilliant afternoon sunshine, I couldn't be sure if I had just made the most catastrophic mistake of my life, or if I had, at long last, stood up for myself after years of silent suffering. The drive back to my small condominium felt interminable. My hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles shone white, and I couldn't stop replaying Charles's voice in my head. The tyrant of the family. After all these years, that's what I had been reduced to in his eyes. A nuisance. An inconvenient obligation to be managed. As I pulled into my designated parking spot, a profound exhaustion washed over me. It wasn't just the fatigue from the day's events, but the accumulated weariness of 15 years of struggling to preserve a relationship with a daughter who had permitted herself to be drawn away from me, piece by piece. Inside, I kicked off my dress shoes and sank into my worn leather armchair, the one Roberta and I had picked out together just after we were married. The condo was quiet. Too quiet. The only sound being the steady ticking of the grandfather clock Roberta had so lovingly restored, filling the profound silence. "What would you have done, Roberta?" I whispered into the empty room. My thoughts drifted back to the day Michelle was born. Roberta and I had been married for only 2 years, barely making ends meet on my mechanic's pay and her part-time job at the local library in our small Ohio town. But we had been so incredibly happy. Our tiny apartment over Mrs. Henderson's garage was filled with more love than you'd find in most sprawling mansions. Then came the accident. Roberta, who was always the first to help a friend in need, had gone to give someone a jump start on the side of the highway. The drunk driver seemed to appear out of nowhere. And just like that, at 26 years old, I was a widower with a 3-year-old daughter to raise. I reached for the photo album on the end table, my fingers tracing the worn, faded cover. Inside were the memories Charles would never acknowledge. Pictures of me working 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads. A photo of Michelle on her first day of school, clutching her lunchbox. Snapshots of her soccer games where I cheered from the sidelines after rushing over from my evening shift at the garage. When the insurance money finally ran out, I'd enrolled in night classes to get my business degree, leaving Michelle with my mother for those few hours, working all day and studying deep into the night. There were no fancy vacations, no expensive luxuries, but there was always an abundance of love. Always. She was such a kind girl, I murmured, my gaze falling on a photo of a 12-year-old Michelle, gap-toothed and beaming, proudly holding up a blue ribbon from the school science fair. What happened to that girl? What happened was Charles. They met in college, when Michelle was studying business on the scholarship I had worked so hard to help her secure. He came from a wealthy family in Connecticut, with rigid expectations about what a proper life should look like. His mother helped Michelle get her first internship at a prestigious marketing firm. His father planned their entire wedding, barely consulting me on any of the details. I tried. Lord knows, I tried to fit in. I'd bring homemade casseroles to their dinner parties, only to later overhear Charles telling his friends that my efforts were quaint, but not quite up to his standards. I offered to babysit when the grandchildren arrived, only to be politely informed that they preferred to use professional child care services. Gradually, the invitations to family gatherings grew less frequent. My advice was dismissed as old-fashioned. My phone calls would go unanswered for days at a time. When I did manage to see Michelle, our visits were always brief, always with Charles hovering nearby, monitoring our every interaction. I turned a page in the album to a more recent photograph. It showed Charles at a charity benefit, his arm wrapped around a woman who was not my daughter. I had found it on Michelle's laptop last Christmas, when she'd asked me to help her transfer some photos of the children. I'd accidentally clicked on the wrong folder, and there they were, dozens of pictures of Charles with this other woman, looking far too comfortable and intimate for it to be a casual friendship. I hadn't told Michelle. How could I? She had constructed her entire world around him, giving up her dream of opening her own small business to take the high-powered corporate position his mother had arranged. Would she even believe me over him? Instead, I'd printed just one of the photos and penned a letter. In it, I explained when and how I had found it, carefully framing my words to express my concern, not as an accusation, but as a father who couldn't bear the thought of his daughter being betrayed. That letter had remained in my desk drawer for 6 months, a silent testament to my dilemma until today. My phone rang, its shrill sound startling me out of my reverie. Michelle's name flashed on the screen. My heart lurched. Had Charles already shown her the letter? "Hello?" I answered, my voice more unsteady than I had intended. "Dad," her tone was icy. "What did you give to Charles?" I closed my eyes, taking a steadying breath. Something he needed to see. "He's incredibly upset, Dad. He won't even tell me what was in the envelope." So, he hadn't shown her. Interesting. "I believe that's a matter for you to discuss with your husband, Michelle," she sighed, that familiar, impatient sound I had grown so accustomed to. "Why can't you ever just let things be? Today was supposed to be about Leo, not another chance for you to stir up drama." The sheer injustice of her accusation felt like a physical blow. Drama? Is that what you call it when I am publicly humiliated by your husband? When I am called a tyrant in front of our entire family? Silence stretched over the line. Then, "He was just kidding, Dad. You're being too sensitive." I thought of all the years I had swallowed my pride, all the times I had made excuses for her absence, all the moments I had pretended not to notice how I was being systematically pushed to the margins of their life. No, Michelle, I'm not too sensitive. I'm just finally standing up for myself. What is that supposed to mean? What was in that letter? For a fleeting moment, I considered telling her everything. How Charles had been systematically isolating her from me. How I had discovered those photos. How I had watched in helpless silence as the sweet, loving girl I raised transformed into someone who could stand by and listen as her own father was insulted. Instead, I simply said, "Ask Charles." After we disconnected the call, I sat in the deepening twilight of my condo, wondering if I had just irrevocably destroyed what little relationship I still had with my only daughter. Yet, for the first time in years, underneath the profound sadness and uncertainty, I felt something else stirring, a sense of relief. The truth, no matter how painful, was finally taking its first tentative steps into the light. 3 long days passed in complete silence. Not a word from Michelle or Charles. My phone sat inertly on the coffee table, a silent stone that I both dreaded and desperately wished would ring. Every time I passed it, I would glance at the screen, checking for missed calls or messages, even though I knew its loud ringtone would have alerted me. I tried to keep my hands and mind occupied. I watered my small collection of houseplants, taking the time to meticulously dust each waxy leaf. I reorganized my bookshelf, first alphabetically by author, then by genre, and finally back to alphabetical order again. I even cast on a new knitting project, a small blue cardigan for Leo that I suspected he would probably never get to wear. On the morning of the 4th day, I woke with an unusual feeling of tranquility. Whatever was to happen now was entirely out of my hands. I had spent 15 years trying to be the perfect, accommodating father-in-law, the perfect doormat. And what had it gotten me? I was still the family tyrant, still held at arm's length, still treated as an afterthought. I made myself a proper breakfast for the first time in days. Scrambled eggs, buttered toast, and a mug of strong black coffee. As I stood at the sink, washing the dishes, the phone rang. My heart leaped into my throat, but the caller ID displayed a name I hadn't anticipated seeing, Martin Lewis. Martin and I had been close friends when our kids were growing up, bonding over Little League games and school fundraisers. Like so many friendships, ours had slowly drifted apart over the years, especially after he moved to Florida to be closer to his son. We still exchanged Christmas cards and made the occasional phone call, but that was the extent of it. "Arthur, is that you?" His voice sounded exactly the same, warm and with a slight gravelly edge from the cigars he'd given up a decade ago. "Martin, what a pleasant surprise." I dried my hands on a kitchen towel, cradling the phone between my shoulder and ear. "I've been thinking about you the last few days," he said. "Something just told me I should pick up the phone today. How are you, really?" That simple, genuine question nearly broke me. How long had it been since someone had truly asked how I was doing? Not the polite, perfunctory "how are you" that only expects fine in return, but a real inquiry from someone who genuinely cared. Before I even realized what I was doing, the entire story came pouring out of me, the years of subtle slights and exclusion. Charles's public humiliation at the baptism, the letter with the photograph, and the suffocating silence that had followed. Martin listened patiently without a single interruption, just making small sounds of empathy now and then. When I finally exhausted my supply of words, he let out a long, deep sigh. "Oh, Arthur, I'm so sorry you've been going through that." Then, after a thoughtful pause, he added, "But I have to say, I'm also a little proud of you." "Proud?" The word caught me completely off guard. "Yes, proud. For finally standing up for yourself. You've spent your entire life putting others first. First Roberta, then Michelle, and now you're still trying to be there for your grandchildren and great-grandson. When was the last time you did something purely for yourself?" I honestly couldn't remember. "Listen," Martin continued, "I'm actually in town for the next couple of weeks, staying with my sister. There's a men's group that meets at the community center on Wednesdays. Mostly guys, our age, some widowers, some divorced, some just looking for a bit of camaraderie. Why don't you come with me tomorrow?" My initial instinct was to decline. What if Michelle called while I was out? What if Charles decided he wanted to talk? But then a thought struck me. I could just bring my cell phone. And more pointedly, why was I still organizing my life around people who clearly were not organizing their lives around me? "I'd like that," I said, surprising myself with the sincerity in my voice. After hanging up with Martin, I felt noticeably lighter. I picked up a framed photograph of Michelle and me from her high school graduation. Her arm was slung around my shoulders, and both of us were beaming with pride and boundless hope for the future. That father and daughter had been a team. Somewhere along the way, I had forgotten that I wasn't just Michelle's father, or Charles's father-in-law, or Leo's great-grandfather. I was still Arthur Gallagher, a man in my own right. That afternoon, I decided to take a walk to the small park 2 blocks from my condo. It was a mild spring day, the kind that carried the first warm hints of the approaching summer. Sitting on a park bench, I watched children laughing on the playground, mothers chatting nearby, and elderly couples strolling hand in hand. My phone rang again. This time, it was my grandson, Liam, Michelle, and Charles's oldest. "Grandpa?" His voice was hesitant, almost as if he were trying not to be overheard. "Liam, my boy, how are you?" I tried to keep my own voice steady and neutral, not wanting to put him in an uncomfortable position. "I'm okay." He paused for a moment. "Mom and Dad are fighting. A lot. It's about you, isn't it? About what happened at the baptism." I closed my eyes, filled with regret that my actions were now affecting my grandchildren. "It's complicated, son. Dad won't tell Mom what was in the letter you gave him. He's been crying a lot, and she's just really, really angry." He lowered his voice even more. "What was in it, Grandpa?" I took a deep breath. "That's something for your parents to sort out, Liam. I am truly sorry that you're caught in the middle of all this." He was quiet for a second. "Are you okay, Grandpa? Dad says some pretty mean things about you sometimes, but I never really believed him. You're not what he says you are." Tears welled in my eyes. "Thank you, son. That means more to me than you will ever know. I miss you," he said simply. "We don't visit you enough." "I miss you too. Maybe when things calm down a bit, you could come over. I could teach you how to make those chocolate chip cookies you used to love so much." "I'd like that," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "I have to go. Dad's coming." After we hung up, I remained in the park for a long time, watching as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. Whatever storm was raging in Michelle and Charles's house was beyond my control. But Liam's call had given me a precious gift, the knowledge that I had not been completely erased from the hearts of my grandchildren. As I walked home, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from Martin. "Looking forward to tomorrow. I'll pick you up at 1. Wear something cheerful." For the first time in days, a genuine smile touched my lips. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring, but it would also bring something new, something that was just for me. And that, in itself, felt like a small, hard-won victory. Martin's car pulled up to the curb precisely at 1:00 p.m. I had followed his advice and chosen to wear a light blue polo shirt that Roberta had always said brought out the color of my eyes. It had been hanging in the back of my closet, practically untouched for years. "You look sharp, Arthur," Martin said with a grin as I settled into the passenger seat. "That color suits you." The community center was a 15-minute drive away, located in a part of town I rarely had reason to visit. As we walked through the doors, I felt a nervous flutter in my stomach. What if I didn't fit in? What if these men had already formed their own tight-knit friendships and I was just an intruder? Martin seemed to sense my apprehension. He gave my arm a gentle, reassuring squeeze. "They're good men, Arthur. Just be yourself." The meeting room was arranged with chairs set in a large, loose circle. About a dozen men were already there, some my age, some older, and a few who were a bit younger. They looked up as we entered, and several of them called out warm greetings to Martin. "Everyone, this is my good friend Arthur," Martin announced, guiding me forward. A tall man with a full head of silver hair approached us. "Welcome, Arthur. I'm Greg, the unofficial organizer of this little gathering. We're just a group of guys supporting each other here." He smiled warmly. "There's no pressure to share anything you're not comfortable with." The meeting started with some casual chit-chat, then transitioned into a more structured discussion about finding new purpose in the later stages of life. I listened, completely fascinated by the stories these men shared. There was a retired history teacher who now volunteered tutoring underprivileged kids, a widower who had taken up woodworking at 70 and recently sold his first custom piece of furniture, and a former accountant who had gone back to school at 65 to study philosophy. When the conversation inevitably turned to the complexities of family relationships, I felt a familiar knot form in my throat. One man described his strained relationship with his daughter-in-law, and heads nodded in quiet understanding around the circle. "Would you like to share anything, Arthur?" Greg asked gently. I hesitated for a moment, then found myself opening up about Michelle, about Charles, about the painful events at the baptism. I didn't mention the specifics of the letter or the photograph, just the long years of being pushed to the sidelines and the final, public humiliation. "I've spent so much time trying to be what they wanted me to be," I concluded, my voice thick with emotion, "that I'm not even sure I know who I am anymore." The room was quiet for a moment. Then a man named Dominic, who must have been close to 80, leaned forward in his chair. "My friend," he said, "that's the most important journey you have left. Finding yourself again." His eyes twinkled with wisdom behind his thick glasses. "And it's the most exciting one, too." After the meeting, several of the men invited Martin and me to join them for coffee. Sitting in the small cafe across the street from the center, I felt a warmth spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with the hot coffee in my hands. These men asked me questions and then actually listened to my answers. They laughed at the few tentative jokes I made. They treated me like a person who mattered. As Martin drove me home, I realized with a jolt that I had gone a full 3 hours without once checking my phone or worrying about what might be happening with Michelle and Charles. "Thank you, Martin," I said simply as he pulled up to my building. Martin smiled. "Same time next week." I nodded, already looking forward to it. When I walked into my condo, the red light on my answering machine was blinking insistently. I pressed the play button, bracing myself. "Dad, it's Michelle. We need to talk. Please call me back." Her voice sounded weary and strained, but it lacked the anger from our last call. I checked the time. 3:30 p.m. Taking a deep breath, I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. "Dad." "Michelle?" How are you?" There was a pause. "I've been better." She cleared her throat. "Can I come over? Alone? I need to talk to you face to face." "Of course," I said, my heart beginning to race. "I can be there in half an hour." After we hung up, I moved around the condo in a whirlwind of nervous energy. I straightened the already perfectly arranged cushions on the sofa, wiped down the already spotless coffee table, and put on a fresh pot of coffee. Michelle had always preferred coffee over tea. Exactly 30 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, the sight of my daughter nearly broke my heart. She looked utterly exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and a slump to her shoulders I had never seen before. "Come in," I said softly, stepping aside to let her pass. She walked in, her eyes scanning the room as if she were seeing it for the very first time, even though she'd made a few brief, always brief visits each year. She sank onto the sofa, while I poured 2 mugs of coffee, adding cream and no sugar to hers, just the way she'd always liked it. "So," she said after taking a long sip, "the letter." I sat in the armchair across from her, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "Yes, Charles finally showed it to me last night." She set the mug down on the table with a careful hand. "He admitted it was him in the photograph, but he swears it was nothing. Just a friend he was comforting through a difficult time." I kept my expression carefully neutral. "I see. Is that really all you have to say?" A flash of the old Michelle, quick to anger, quick to frustration. "What would you like me to say, Michelle? I found that photo by pure accident. I gave it to Charles because I believed he should know that I knew. What he tells you about it is a matter between the two of you." She ran a hand through her hair, a gesture so familiar that it made my chest ache. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "I checked his phone this morning while he was in the shower. There were texts, Dad, hundreds of them. This has been going on for over a year." I reached across the space between us and took her hand. For the first time in a long time, she didn't pull away. "I feel like such an idiot," she whispered, her voice cracking. "And the worst part is, all the things he's been saying about you for all these years. I believed him. I let him push you away because he convinced me you were controlling and judgmental." She finally looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry, Dad." "Oh, Michelle." My own eyes filled with tears. "We both made mistakes. I should have been more direct with you years ago instead of just withdrawing. Liam told me he called you," she said, offering a weak, watery smile. "He said you were nothing like Charles described. He said you were kind and didn't even say a bad word about Charles when you had every opportunity. We talked for over 2 hours. I mean, we really talked. In a way we hadn't since before she met Charles. She told me about the deep-seated problems in her marriage that she had been hiding from everyone, about her regrets concerning her career path, and about her dawning realization that she had been controlled just as much as I had been excluded. "What are you going to do now?" I asked finally. She shook her head, looking lost. "I don't know. We have the kids to think about, but things can't possibly go on the way they have been." She looked at me intently. "Whatever happens, I want you back in our lives. In my life and in the kids' lives." As she stood to leave, she embraced me in a tight, heartfelt hug, the kind she used to give me when she was a little girl. "I've missed you, Dad," she whispered, even when I didn't realize it. After she left, I sat in the quiet of my condo, trying to process everything that had just happened. The letter had accomplished what years of patient silence never could. It had cracked open the carefully constructed facade of Michelle and Charles's marriage. I took no joy in their pain, but as I looked again at the photo of Michelle and me at her graduation, I felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, we might find our way back to being a team again. The following Saturday, I received an unexpected text from Liam. "Can I come over today, Grandpa? Around 2? My heart leaped. "Of course, son. I'll have those cookies ready." I spent the morning tidying up, even though the condo was already spotless, and baking a batch of chocolate chip cookies the way Liam had always loved them, slightly soft and gooey in the center, with crispy edges. The familiar, comforting routine of measuring, mixing, and baking brought back a flood of memories of afternoons spent with Liam and his younger sister Julia when they were small, before Charles had decided my influence was outdated. At precisely 2:00 p.m., the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I was surprised to find not just Liam, but Julia as well. At 17, she was nearly a young woman now, tall and slender like Michelle had been at that age. "Julia, what a wonderful surprise." I hugged them both, noticing how Julia hesitated for just a moment before relaxing into the embrace. "Mom said we could come," Liam explained as they settled onto the sofa. "Dad doesn't know we're here." I frowned slightly. "I don't want to cause any more problems for you all." Julia shrugged, already reaching for a warm cookie. "There are already problems, Grandpa. Lots of them." The frankness in her voice surprised me. I had always thought of Julia as the quiet one, the family peacemaker. "Mom moved out 3 days ago," Liam said bluntly. "She's staying at Aunt Paula's." I sat down heavily in my armchair. "Oh, I didn't know." "Dad blames you," Julia added, her eyes meeting mine directly. "He says you interfered and ruined everything." I felt a sharp stab of guilt, which was quickly replaced by a surge of indignation. "I didn't ruin anything. I just brought to light what was already broken." Liam nodded. "That's what Mom said too." He hesitated, then asked the question I had been anticipating. "What was in that letter, Grandpa? The one you gave Dad at the baptism?" I looked at my 2 grandchildren, these young people caught in the crossfire of adult failures. They deserve some version of the truth, but how much should I tell them? "It contained a photograph I found by accident last Christmas," I said carefully. "Your father with another woman. They looked very close." Julia's expression hardened. "I knew it. I saw texts on his phone once from someone named Maria. He told me she was just a colleague from work. He's been seeing her for over a year," Liam added quietly. "Mom found out everything." I reached out and took both of their hands in mine. "I am so sorry you two are going through this. I never, ever wanted to hurt anyone, especially not you." "We know, Grandpa." Liam squeezed my hand. "But Dad has been hurting people for years, especially you." Julia nodded in agreement. "He was always making little comments about you when you weren't around. Mom would sometimes try to defend you, but never very strongly. It always made us feel uncomfortable." A lump formed in my throat. For all these years I had assumed the grandchildren were slowly being turned against me, but they had seen right through Charles's manipulations all along. "Why did you wait so long to say something about the photo?" Liam asked, his question laced with genuine curiosity. I sighed, searching for the right words. I was afraid. Afraid of losing what little connection I still had left with all of you, and I kept thinking, maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was some innocent explanation. "There wasn't," Julia said flatly. "We spent the rest of the afternoon talking, truly talking, about the past 15 years. The grandchildren filled in gaps from their own perspectives, telling me about times Charles had intercepted gifts I'd sent forgotten to pass along my messages, or fabricated excuses for why they couldn't visit their grandpa. "He told us you were too busy with your own friends," Liam said, his voice tinged with indignation. "Or that you didn't like having kids around because we made a mess." I shook my head, fighting back a fresh wave of tears. "I was never too busy for you. Never. As evening began to draw in, Michelle called to check on them. After Liam assured her they were fine, he handed the phone to me. "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice sounding weary but warm. "Are they behaving themselves?" "They're wonderful," I replied. "Michelle, I hope you know I never intended for—" "I know," she interrupted gently. "The truth was bound to come out sooner or later. It's better that it came from someone who loves me than from a stranger." After the call, I made a simple dinner of spaghetti and garlic bread, and we all ate together at my small kitchen table. It felt surreal, having my grandchildren here with me after so many years of brief, supervised and stilted visits. "We should do this more often," Julia said, surprising me. "Even after, whatever is going to happen with Mom and Dad happens." "I would like that very much," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. When it was time for them to leave, they both hugged me tightly. Liam lingered for a moment at the door. "Mom told us something else," he said quietly, "about everything you did for her after Grandma Roberta died, working 2 jobs, putting her through college." He glanced around my modest condo. "You could have had a much bigger place, a nicer life, if you hadn't spent everything on her." I cupped his cheek in my hand. "I have exactly the life I chose, Liam. Being your mother's father has been the greatest joy of my life." After they left, I sat alone in my suddenly quiet condo, reflecting on the day's startling revelations. The damage Charles had inflicted ran far deeper than I had ever imagined, but so did the resilience of our family's bonds. My grandchildren had seen the truth all along, despite his relentless efforts to paint me as the villain of the story. The next morning, my phone rang early. It was Michelle. "Dad, can I come over? There's something important I need to show you." An hour later, Michelle arrived carrying a large cardboard box. She set it down on my coffee table and carefully opened the flaps. "I found these in Charles's closet," she said, pulling out a thick stack of cards and letters. "They're from you." I picked one up. It was a birthday card I had sent to Liam 3 years ago. Tucked inside was a note about the gift certificate that had been enclosed with it, a certificate Liam had apparently never received. "There are dozens of them," Michelle said quietly. "Birthday cards, Christmas gifts, little notes about wanting to arrange visits." She met my gaze, her own eyes filled with shame. "He kept all of these from us, Dad. From the kids. He told me you had stopped sending things years ago, that you'd lost interest in being a part of our lives." I stared down at the box, at the tangible, undeniable proof of Charles's calculated deception. All those times I had thought my efforts were being ignored, they had actually been intercepted. "There's something else," Michelle said, reaching deeper into the box. She pulled out a small, weathered photo album that I recognized immediately. "My memory book," I whispered, taking it from her with trembling hands. "I thought I'd lost it when I moved 5 years ago." "He must have taken it when you were downsizing," Michelle said softly. "Dad, I am so sorry. I had no idea how deliberate and cruel all of this was." As I opened the album, tears filled my eyes. Here was the entire record of Michelle's childhood. Her first steps, her first day of school, her soccer games, science fairs, graduation, all the precious moments we had shared. It was all the evidence of the deep love between us, the very evidence that Charles had tried so hard to erase. "The letter you gave him," Michelle said hesitantly. "It wasn't just about the photo, was it?" I shook my head. "No, the photo was in there, but so were these." I pointed to several pictures in the album. Michelle and me at her college graduation, at Liam's birth, at Julia's kindergarten play. I wanted to remind him of who we were before he ever came into our lives. I wanted him to see what it was that he was destroying. Michelle nodded slowly, a look of dawning comprehension in her eyes. "It wasn't just about his affair. It was about our history. The history he tried to steal from us. Yes, I said simply. It was about the truth. 3 months passed, bringing with them a series of changes I could never have imagined on the day of Leo's baptism. Michelle had filed for divorce, a process that Charles was contesting with bitter resentment. The grandchildren began spending every other weekend with me, filling my small condo with the kind of laughter and teenage drama that I now treasured. Even on the weekends they stayed with Charles. They would call or text me, steadfastly refusing to let him isolate them from me ever again. My Wednesday men's group had become a cherished anchor in my week. These men, once complete strangers, were now dear friends who celebrated my small victories and offered unwavering support during the more difficult moments. Dominic, the 80-year-old with the twinkling eyes, had become a particularly close confidant. His wisdom, always delivered with a dose of unfailing humor, helped me navigate the complex emotions of watching my daughter's marriage dissolve, knowing that my actions had been the catalyst. "You didn't break anything that wasn't already cracked beyond repair," he reminded me one afternoon when a wave of guilt washed over me. "All you did was stop pretending you couldn't see the cracks." On a warm Sunday in July, I was in the kitchen preparing lunch for my now weekly get-together with Michelle when my phone rang. It was Liam. "Grandpa, is it okay if we bring someone extra to lunch today?" "Of course, son. Is it a friend?" There was a slight pause. "It's Leo. Mom picked him up from Dad this morning for a few hours. I thought you might want to see him." My breath caught in my throat. Since the day of the baptism, I hadn't seen my great-grandson. Charles had maintained absolute control over Leo's schedule, refusing to let Michelle bring him along when she visited me. "I'd love that," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. I spent the next hour in a flurry of happy preparation, digging out the old toy box I had kept from when Liam and Julia were little, and double-checking that I had everything a 6-month-old baby might need. By the time the doorbell rang, I was a bundle of nerves and excitement. Michelle stood on the doorstep holding a chubby, smiling baby boy with those same unmistakable Gallagher eyes. Liam and Julia flanked her, grinning at my obvious delight. "Dad," Michelle said softly, "I'd like you to properly meet your great-grandson, Leo Robert Gallagher." My eyes filled with tears at the inclusion of my own middle name, something I hadn't known. "Mom insisted," Liam explained, seeing my reaction. "Even though Dad argued against it, she said Leo should carry the name of the man who sacrificed everything for our family." Michelle gently placed Leo into my arms. The baby looked up at me with wide, curious eyes, completely unafraid. I traced a gentle finger along his soft cheek, marveling at the perfection of his tiny features, the perfect curve of his ear, and the little dimple that appeared when he gave me a gummy, toothless smile. "Hello, Leo," I whispered. "I'm your great-grandpa, Arthur." The afternoon passed in a warm, joyful haze. Leo napped in the portable crib Michelle had brought, woke up to be fed and changed, and spent happy hours being passed from one adoring family member to another. I couldn't take my eyes off him, this newest, precious branch on our family tree. "He likes you," Julia observed, as Leo's tiny hand gripped my finger tightly. "He's usually fussy with people he doesn't know well." "Babies can sense good hearts," Michelle said, her eyes meeting mine from across the living room. Later, as Michelle prepared to take Leo back to Charles, she hesitated at the door. "Dad, there's something I've been wanting to tell you." She shifted Leo to her other arm. "I've been offered a teaching position at the local community college. Business management, just like I always wanted to do." "Oh, Michelle, that's wonderful news." I knew how much she had given up when she took the high-pressure corporate job Charles's mother had arranged for her. "It's a lot less money," she admitted, And Charles is using that against me in the divorce proceedings. But for the first time in years, I'm actually excited about my work. I reached out and touched her arm gently. Your mother would be so proud of you. I know I am. After they left, I sat in my quiet apartment, feeling overwhelmed by the day's powerful emotions. I picked up the phone and called Dominic. She brought the baby, I said as soon as he answered. My great-grandson. I finally got to hold him. Well, isn't that something? Dominic replied, and I could hear the broad smile in his voice. Life has a funny way of coming full circle, doesn't it, my friend? That night, I dreamed of Roberta. We were young again, strolling hand in hand through a sunlit park, and she was pushing a baby stroller. You did good, Artie, she said, using the nickname that only she had ever called me. You stood up for yourself. You reclaimed your rightful place in the family. I woke with tears on my cheeks, but with an incredible lightness in my heart. The next few weeks ushered in even more positive changes. Michelle found a small apartment just a few blocks from mine, which made it much easier for the grandchildren to visit both of us. Charles, finally realizing he was losing control of the situation, agreed to a more reasonable custody arrangement that included regular visits with Leo for me. The first time Charles brought Leo to my apartment, his face was a rigid mask of barely concealed fury. He didn't come inside, simply handed the baby carrier to me at the door. 2 hours, he said flatly. Not a minute more. I just nodded, determined not to give him any ammunition to cut off these precious visits. Thank you for bringing him, Charles. He looked at me then, really looked at me, for what felt like the first time in 15 years. You think you've won, don't you? Destroyed my marriage, turned my own children against me. I held his gaze steadily. This was never about winning or losing, Charles. It was about the truth. And the truth is, I never wanted to destroy anything. I just wanted to be treated with a basic level of dignity and respect. He didn't respond, just turned on his heel and walked away. But I noticed something in his posture, a slight lowering of his normally rigid shoulders, that made me wonder if maybe, just maybe, a tiny seed of understanding had been planted. Over the next several months, a new, healthier rhythm established itself in our family. Charles gradually softened, especially as he saw how much the children were thriving with both Michelle and me actively back in their lives. We would never be friends, Charles and I, but we learned to coexist in a state of cool, polite civility for the sake of the family we all shared. Michelle flourished in her new teaching position, rediscovering the passion for business that had been buried under years of corporate conformity. Liam applied to several colleges, including my alma mater, and asked for my help in reviewing his application essays. Julia joined her high school newspaper, discovering a surprising talent for writing that I never knew she possessed. And Leo, dear sweet Leo, grew stronger and more curious with each passing day. By his first birthday, he was toddling around my apartment, pulling books from the lower shelves, banging on pots and pans with wooden spoons, and falling asleep in my arms as I rocked him, singing the same simple lullabies I had once sung to Michelle. The day of Leo's first birthday party arrived. It was not a grand, formal affair like the baptism had been, but a small, intimate gathering at Michelle's new home. Charles was there with his parents, and they kept mostly to themselves in one corner of the living room. My friends from the Wednesday group had helped me pick out the perfect gift, a beautifully handcrafted wooden train set that Dominic's son had made. As I watched Leo tear open his presents, squealing with delight at each new treasure, a profound sense of contentment washed over me. Martin sat beside me on the sofa, having become a welcome and regular visitor at our extended family gatherings. "You look happy, Arthur," he observed. "I am," I replied, surprised to realize just how completely true that statement was. I never thought that standing up for myself would lead to all of this. That's because you spent far too many years believing you didn't deserve to be treated well, Martin said wisely. But better late than never, right? Michelle approached me, carrying a small wrapped package. Dad, this is for you. For me? But it's Leo's birthday. Just open it, she urged, sitting down on my other side. Inside the wrapping was a small, elegant silver frame. The photograph it contained made my breath catch in my chest. It was a candid shot of Leo and me, captured in a moment of shared, joyous laughter during one of his recent visits. On the back, an inscription was engraved, "To Arthur, the heart of our family, with love and gratitude." I looked up at my daughter, tears blurring my vision. "Thank you." Michelle squeezed my hand. "No, Dad, thank you for never giving up on us, even when we gave you every reason to." Across the room, Leo broke free from the circle of gifts and toddled unsteadily in my direction, his little arms outstretched. I leaned forward to meet him, scooping him up into a big embrace just as he reached me. In that perfect moment, surrounded by the family I had so nearly lost and the dear friends who had helped me find my strength, I finally understood. The letter I had handed Charles on that fateful day wasn't just about exposing a secret or seeking some kind of revenge. It was about reclaiming my place in the world, not just as someone's father or grandfather or great-grandfather, but as Arthur Gallagher, a man worthy of both respect and love. As Leo snuggled against my chest, his small hand patting my cheek, I found myself silently thanking Charles for that cruel public insult at the baptism. Without it, I might never have found the courage to finally break the suffocating silence that had imprisoned me for so long. Sometimes, I reflected, the greatest gift we ever receive comes disguised as a wound, one that forces us to finally stand up and fight for the life we truly deserve. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.